The bright lights of the royal spaceship gleamed like stars in the night sky. It was the pride of the Zarnesian fleet, a ship designed to represent the power and grace of the alien queen, Zarnes. The spaceship, made of precious metals, sparkled as it glided through the vast expanse of space. People from across the galaxy admired the elegance and might of Queen Zarnes and her fleet. But today, something was wrong. The queen had collapsed in the middle of a grand banquet held in her honor. A large crowd of alien dignitaries from various star systems gathered in the spacious hall, the air thick with excitement and conversation. The tables were covered with the finest foods and drink from every corner of the galaxy. Music played softly in the background, but the festivities stopped when Queen Zarnes suddenly gasped. She clutched her chest, a sharp pain seizing her. The regal figure, who had commanded respect for decades, fell to the floor with a loud thud. Room fell into stunned silence. Her closest advisors rushed to her side. Healers and medical experts, some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy, quickly surrounded her. Yet, despite their expertise, they could do nothing to help. The queen's breathing was shallow, and her face turned a pale shade. Her pulse was weak and irregular. Something was terribly wrong. The royal healers, known for their unmatched skill in treating alien illnesses, could not diagnose her condition. They worked furiously, trying to figure out what had caused this. Sudden and shocking collapse? No. No. One of the royal healers cried out, her face pale with fear. She checked the queen's pulse once more. This cannot be happening. The other healers exchanged worried glances. One of them, a tall alien with silver skin, turned to the queen's advisor, a short, plump alien named Garrow. We need to get her to the medical bay, quickly. Garrow, his face tight with concern, nodded. It called for more guards to assist in carrying the queen to safety. The healer rushed alongside her, scanning her with every advanced tool at her disposal, but the readings made no sense. There is no explanation, she muttered under her breath. Her heart is failing, but it shouldn't be. The ship's massive corridors, filled with the hum of its engines, felt eerily quiet as the group rushed the queen down to the medical bay. The doctors worked tirelessly, bringing in advanced equipment from every corner of the galaxy. But every scan, every diagnostic test, came back with the same result: nothing. The queen's heart was struggling to beat, but no one knew why. Garrow stood at the entrance, watching helplessly. He was the queen's closest advisor, trusted with her life. His mind raced, but there were no answers. How could this be? His queen, the heart and soul of the Zarnesian Empire, could not simply be falling ill without cause. He paced, running his hands through his hair, trying to think. The queen was powerful, beyond anything humans or other species could imagine. How could something so simple, so fragile, take her down? We need more information, Garrow shouted, his voice cracking. I will not allow my queen to die. The healer turned to him, her face grim. We have no answers yet. We're not sure what's causing her heart to fail. It could be anything. There are thousands of reasons, and we've eliminated most of them. But nothing we've tried seems to work. As hours passed, the situation grew even more dire. The queen's vital signs began to drop. Garrow, now more panicked than ever, looked to the crew for any solution. He knew there had to be a way to save her, but he didn't know how. Word spread quickly across the galaxy. A mysterious illness had struck Queen Zarnes, and no one could explain it. The news reached far and wide, sending shockwaves through the various star systems. No one had ever seen anything like this before. How could someone as powerful as the queen fall to something as simple as a heart attack? The situation in the royal spaceship grew tense. Alien dignitaries who had once admired the queen began to question her power. Rumors swirled that the queen was weakening and might not survive. In a quiet corner of the spaceship, a message was sent to an unlikely person, a human healer. Alina was an expert in human medicine, a healer with knowledge passed down through generations. She lived in a small village on a distant human colony, far from the grandeur of the galaxy's political powerhouses. But Elena's skills were known in certain circles. She had been able to cure diseases and ailments no one else could. The royals had heard of her abilities and sent a desperate message. We need your help, the message read. Queen Zarnes, the ruler of the Zarnesian Empire, is gravely ill. No one knows why. Please, we require your assistance. Come quickly. Alina, sitting in her small medical clinic, read the message over and over again. She knew that responding to such a call would change her life forever. But the queen was in danger. Her expertise could be the key to saving her. After some hesitation, Alina prepared herself for the journey to the royal ship. As she packed her things and made her final preparations, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a mission unlike any other. This was her chance to prove herself to the galaxy. But she didn't know what she was walking into. No one could have prepared her for the gravity of the situation. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, almost soothing, as Alina sat in the small transport pod, staring out into the endless void of space. She had never traveled so far from home, never been to a place so distant and mysterious. The royal fleet was unlike anything she had ever seen in her life. The massive ships, adorned with jewels and strange metals, seemed to float effortlessly through space as if they were guided by some unseen hand. Alina clutched the datapad she had been given, reading through the instructions once more. She had been told that she would be met with great ceremony, but she didn't feel ready. She had spent most of her life healing small wounds and treating illnesses on her home planet. She was being called to save the queen of an entire empire. How could she, a simple healer, possibly help in a situation so dire? Despite her nerves, Alina was determined. The queen's life was on the line, and she could not turn her back on such a request. She had healed countless people in her life, but nothing like this, nothing this important. As the transport pod docked with the royal flagship, Alina's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She was met by a small group of attendants who led her through the grand hallways of the ship. The walls were lined with alien symbols glowing softly, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet and metallic. She was escorted to the queen's private medical suite, where the air was heavy with tension. The room was filled with Zarnesian healers, some of the brightest minds in the galaxy, all standing around the queen's bedside. Alina could see the alien queen, her once beautiful form now pale and fragile. Her long, shimmering hair lay around her face, and her golden eyes, usually bright and commanding, were dull and tired. One of the royal advisors, a tall figure with glowing blue skin, stepped forward. "You are Alina, the human healer, correct?" Alina nodded, her voice soft. "Yes, I am. How is she?" The advisor looked toward the queen, then back at Alina with a heavy sigh. "We've tried everything, every treatment, every method. Works. The queen is slowly dying, and no one can explain why." Alina took a deep breath. She stepped closer to the queen's side, her eyes scanning the monitors that surrounded the bed. The alien technology was advanced, far beyond anything she had ever seen. Still, there was a strange sense of desperation in the room. The healers, despite their brilliance, seemed to be running out of ideas. "Please, we're all at your mercy," the advisor continued. "We've been told that humans have strange healing abilities, something that might be the answer to her condition. We've searched far and wide, but nothing seems to help. You are our last hope." Alina nodded slowly, her mind racing. She couldn't fail, not now. The queen's heart monitor beeped slowly, each pulse weaker than the last. Alina knew the clock was ticking. She needed to act quickly. She placed her hand gently on the queen's chest, feeling for any sign of life beneath her fragile skin. She could feel the faint rhythm of the queen's heartbeat, but it was erratic. She could sense that something was terribly wrong, but she needed more information. Alina's mind returned to the basics of human anatomy. What could she do? What did she know that might help? The answer didn't come easily, but she knew that her human knowledge, simple as it was, might be the only thing that could make a difference here. Her hand hovered over the queen's chest, and she closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She had healed countless people before, but this was unlike anything she had encountered. It was a challenge, one that would test every bit of her skill. "How long has she been like this?" Alina asked, turning toward the advisor. The advisor glanced at a nearby wall screen, where the details of the queen's condition were displayed. "It's been over 12 hours since the attack, and the symptoms They keep getting worse. We've never seen anything like it. Her heart is failing, but we can't determine why. It's not any disease we know of. Lena's mind began to race. There had to be an explanation. She looked down at the queen once more, trying to gather all the pieces. There were too many unknowns. The alien physiology was different. But there had to be something, some clue that could explain what was happening. She noticed a faint pattern in the queen's vitals. The erratic heartbeat was almost rhythmic, like a clock, and yet it wasn't. Quite right. It seemed familiar, but she couldn't place where she had seen it before. "Can I ask the queen some questions?" Alina inquired, her voice soft but firm. The advisor hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I will let you try. But be warned, her mind is not as clear as it once was." Lena nodded in understanding. She gently leaned closer to the queen's ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Majesty, can you hear me?" For a moment there was no response. Then slowly the queen's eyelids fluttered open, and her golden eyes met Elena's. There was a flicker of recognition in them, but it was faint. I can hear you," the queen whispered, her voice weak. Elena's heart soared. "Your Majesty, I need to ask you a few questions. I need to understand what's happening to you." The queen nodded faintly, her breathing shallow.
"Hey, what do you..."
"Need to know, human?" Lena paused, searching for the right words. "Have you been exposed to anything unusual recently? Any events, any stress, anything that could have caused this?" The queen's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. She whispered, I've been feeling strange for weeks, tired, weak, but I thought it was just the demands of ruling, and then this happened." The pain came suddenly. Elena's mind began to work faster.
"Ow."
"The pain," she repeated. "Was there anything that triggered it?" The queen closed her eyes once more, her face tight with concentration. I don't know. I thought it was stress, but then I felt my chest tighten, and I couldn't breathe." Elena's eyes widened. She stepped back for a moment, looking at the advisors. "I think I know what this is," she said, her voice filled with hope. The advisor leaned in. "What do you mean? Do you have a solution?" Elena nodded. "I believe this is a human condition, something that your advanced technology cannot treat. I will need to apply human healing methods." The advisor looked skeptical, but said nothing. Elena was their last hope. She took another deep breath, ready to face the challenge ahead. Elena stood in the royal medical suite, staring at the queen, who lay unconscious in her bed. The tension in the room was almost palpable. The Zarnesian healers were still present, their alien faces marked with frustration and doubt. Lena knew she was the only one left who could help. But even she had no clear idea of how to treat the queen's mysterious condition. The queen's heart monitor beeped in a slow, irregular rhythm, echoing in the stillness of the room. Elena could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her. She was a healer, yes, but she had always worked with human bodies. She had never dealt with a species so different, so alien, yet somehow she had to find a way. As she approached the queen's side, Elena took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She had already examined the queen's symptoms, and now, after the queen's brief moment of clarity, Elena was more certain than ever. The symptoms seemed to point to something familiar, something that existed in humans, but not in the other species she knew. Elena glanced back at the royal healers, still watching her closely. They were waiting for her to make a move, to take action. But the pressure was immense. She could see it in their eyes. They wanted a solution, but they didn't believe a human could have it. Despite their skepticism, Elena had no choice but to try. The Zarnesian healers had given up on their technology. Their medical equipment, though advanced beyond anything humans had ever seen, had failed to reveal the cause of the queen's heart. Failure. They had scanned her body, measured every vital sign, and run every test possible, yet nothing made sense. That's when they had called for her, a human, to step in. "Can you help her, Darrow?" the queen's advisor asked softly, his voice filled with uncertainty. Elena didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned over the queen's bed, her fingers brushing against the queen's cold, pale skin. She focused on the faint heartbeat she could feel beneath the surface. There had to be a way. Lena had read of ancient human treatments that involved not just technology, but a deep understanding of the body's balance. Could she apply those methods here? Her mind flashed back to her training, to the countless hours spent studying human anatomy. She had always been drawn to the idea that the body could heal itself, that with the right care and attention, even the most severe injuries could be reversed. But that required patience, and most importantly, trust in the process. She had no idea whether this approach would work on an alien body, but it was her only chance. "I need to observe the queen's breathing patterns," Lena said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her mind. The healers exchanged uncertain glances, but they stepped back to allow her room. Alina placed her hands on the queen's chest, gently feeling the rise and fall of her breath. The air was shallow, weak, struggling to fill the queen's lungs. It was unlike anything Alina had ever experienced before. The queen's chest barely moved, as though her body had forgotten how to take a full breath. Alina closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The key, she believed, lay in the queen's lungs. They were strained and not receiving the oxygen they needed, and that was causing the heart to overwork itself. But what could she do? Her human knowledge told her that improving the queen's ability to breathe would take some form of manual intervention. But how could she apply that to an alien's body? Her mind raced as she recalled an ancient human technique, a form of manual therapy that worked by using pressure points to help a person breathe more freely. It was used in emergency cases when patients could not take a full breath on their own. The technique required placing gentle pressure on the body's vital areas, urging the diaphragm to expand and the lungs to open up. But would it work on the queen? Alina turned to the royal healer standing nearby. "I need something sharp, something that can safely cut through the skin, but with precision." "We don't have time for a regular incision," she explained. The healer looked at her, unsure of what to make of her request. "What exactly are you planning to do?" the healer asked, a skeptical edge in his voice. "I will need to carefully release pressure around her lungs to allow them to expand," Lena explained, her tone firm but calm. "If I can help her take in enough air, her heart will have a chance to recover." The healer hesitated for a moment, then nodded, disappearing for a moment before returning with a small laser-sharp instrument. Alina took the tool and studied it. It was similar to a human scalpel, but with a much finer edge. She needed to be precise. One wrong move could cause more harm than good. With steady hands, she turned back to the queen. She placed her fingers gently on the queen's rib cage, feeling the strained muscles beneath. She pressed lightly on certain areas, feeling for the spots where tension had built up. The pressure was affecting the queen's ability to breathe, and Elena's goal was to release that tension in the most controlled way possible. The royal healers looked on in silence as Elena worked. For a moment, there was nothing but the soft beeping of the monitor and the quiet hiss of the medical equipment. Elena's focus never wavered as she gently made a small incision along the queen's side, just below her ribs. The queen's body stiffened slightly, but Elena was careful, applying just enough pressure to free the trapped air from the queen's lungs as she worked. Elena's mind was laser-focused on the task at hand. The queen's breathing began to steady, ever so slightly. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Elena's heart raced as she continued, praying that her human healing methods would work on this alien body. The queen's pulse remained weak, but at least it wasn't growing weaker. Elena looked up at the other healers, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and hope. "She's still with us," Lena said quietly. "But I need more time." Garrow, who had been watching, anxiously nodded, his face showing signs of relief. "Please, take whatever time you need. We will do whatever it takes to ensure she survives." Lena gave a small nod and returned to her work. She had made progress, but the battle was far from over. The queen's condition was improving, but there was still a long way to go. Elena knew that only time and her steady hands could save the queen now. Alina wiped the sweat from her brow as she continued to work on the queen, carefully adjusting the pressure around her chest. The room was tense, with all eyes on the healer from Earth, Despite her progress, she could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with every passing moment. The queen was not improving as much as Alina had hoped. Her pulse remained weak, and although her breathing was steadier, it was still far from normal. The alien healers were quiet now, watching her every move. They had not expected Alina to be the one to treat the queen, and many still doubted her methods. But even they couldn't deny that she had made progress. They had tried everything, but it was only Elena's human techniques that had slowed the decline. Elena's mind raced. She could feel that something wasn't right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The queen's heart was the issue, a doubt about that, but there was something more to it, something deeper that wasn't being addressed. As Alina worked, she recalled the brief conversation she'd had with the queen earlier. The queen had mentioned feeling weak for weeks before the attack, feeling tired and struggling to breathe. That piece of information had stayed with Alina. What could cause such sudden weakness in a powerful being like Queen Zarnes? Something didn't add up. Why did she feel this way? Alina muttered to herself, her hand still on the queen's chest. Feeling for any signs of change, the royal healers exchanged uneasy glances, but Alina was too focused to notice. Her mind began to piece together a theory, but it was one she didn't want to consider. Could the queen's weakness have been caused by something outside of her physical body? Something beyond just a physical ailment? The air in the room felt heavier, and Elena's thoughts grew darker. It was then that she noticed something strange, something that had escaped her attention before. As her fingers pressed gently against the queen's rib cage, she felt a faint pulse under the queen's skin. At first she thought it was just the queen's heartbeat, but as she pressed down harder, she realized it was something else entirely, something foreign. Alina paused, her breath catching in her throat. She withdrew her hands from the queen's chest and began scanning the area with her eyes, examining the skin where she had felt that strange pulse. There was a faint discoloration near the queen's shoulder, small, almost imperceptible mark. "What is that?" Alina whispered to herself, moving closer to get a better look. One of the Zarnesian healers, tall figure with silver skin, noticed Elena's sudden shift in attention. "What do you see?" he asked, his voice tense. Elena hesitated, unsure of what she had just discovered. "I'm not sure. But I think the queen's condition is being caused by something else." She leaned in closer, examining the spot carefully. The silver-skinned healer walked over and looked at the mark where Elena was focused. This isn't normal," he murmured. "This is not from any natural illness." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Could the queen have been poisoned? The idea seemed impossible. The Zarnesian Empire was known for its strength and protection. How could something so sinister have slipped past their defenses? "What is this?" Alina asked, her voice rising. With urgency, the healer turned pale. It is an implant, a foreign object placed inside her body." The room fell into shocked silence. Alina felt a wave of confusion flood over her. An implant? But who would dare place such a thing inside a queen, and why? The healer stepped back, his face a mask of disbelief. "This, we did not know. We, We thought the queen's condition was natural, something related to stress or age. But this..." He trailed off, his voice thick with shock. Alina could hardly believe what she was hearing. She quickly began to run her hands over the queen's skin, searching for more signs of the implant. It had to be there somewhere, and if it was, how had it gone unnoticed for so long? As she searched, another royal healer, a female with dark, blue skin, stepped forward. "We are not sure how long it has been there," she said, her voice shaking. "But we've never seen anything like this before. We don't know who would have done such a thing." Elena's heart raced as she finally located a small indentation just below the queen's ribcage. It was barely visible, but it was unmistakably an implant site. She pressed her fingers gently against the mark, and a small hidden compartment opened up under her touch. Inside, there was a tiny device, metallic and intricate. "This is no ordinary implant," Elena said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. Whoever did this, they must have had access to the highest levels of technology? This device is far beyond anything I've seen before. Room fell into an uneasy silence. Healers exchanged worried glances. They were all aware of the gravity of what Alina had just discovered. Someone had intentionally placed this device inside their queen. It was clearly the source of her condition. Do you think this is what's causing her heart problems? Garo, the queen's advisor, asked, his voice shaky with worry. Alina nodded slowly. It's possible. This device could be interfering with the queen's heart function, might even be draining her energy, weakening her over time. Garo's face twisted with anger. Who would do such a thing? Who would harm our queen like this? Alina didn't have an answer. She could only guess at the motive behind such a cruel act. But one thing was certain, this was no simple illness. Someone had orchestrated this attack, and it was designed to weaken the queen, perhaps even kill her. We need to remove this implant, Alina said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. If we can get rid of it, the queen might recover. But it won't be easy. The healers nodded in agreement, their earlier doubts about Alina's methods fading. They now realized that they had underestimated her. She had uncovered the truth. And now it was up to them to work together to save their queen. As the team of healers began preparing for the procedure, Alina's mind raced with questions. Who had placed the implant inside the queen? Was it an internal betrayal? Or had someone from outside the Empire done this? There were too many unknowns. But one thing was clear, the battle to save the queen was far from over. The air in the royal medical suite was thick with tension. Alina stood over Queen Zarnes, her mind racing with the task ahead. Kay, the alien healers, worked around her, preparing the tools and equipment they would need to remove the implant that had been secretly placed inside the queen's body. Alina had carefully examined the device, and now, after uncovering the truth, she knew that this would not be an easy procedure. But she also knew it was their only hope. This is our only chance, Alina muttered to herself as she looked at the queen, still unconscious. We have to remove it. The royal healers nodded in agreement. They had been skeptical of Alina's methods at first, but now they could see the power of her determination and her knowledge. They understood that the queen's life depended on what they did next. Are you ready? Asked the silver-skinned healer, who had been watching Alina closely since the moment she arrived. His tone was calm, but Alina could see the worry in his eyes. He was still unsure if the procedure would work, but they had no other choice. Alina nodded, her face set with determination. You don't have time to hesitate. Let's begin. With steady hands, Alina reached for the small, intricate tool that had been prepared for this moment. It was designed to cut away the skin with precision, leaving no trace of damage. The alien healers had never seen a procedure like this before, but they trusted Alina. She had already shown them that she had the skills to save their queen. As Alina carefully made the first incision, the room seemed to hold its breath. Sound of the tool cutting through the queen's skin was faint, but it felt like thunder in the quiet room. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she focused on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. This was the only way. To save the queen, the alien healers stood back, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. They had never seen human methods in action, and they weren't sure if they would work. But they knew they had no other option. The queen's condition was growing worse, and if Alina didn't succeed, they would lose her. Alina's hands were steady as she worked. The incision was small, but precise, just enough to expose the implant hidden inside the queen's body. She gently pressed her fingers against the implant, feeling the cold metal beneath her touch. It was unlike any technology she had ever seen. Before, it was sleek, smooth, and strangely organic in its design. Whoever had created it had access to knowledge far beyond anything human technology could offer. Are you certain this will work? Garo, the queen's advisor, asked quietly, his voice full of worry. He was standing at the back of the room, watching closely but not daring to come too near. Alina didn't look up as she continued to work, but her voice was calm and reassuring. It will. This is our only shot. The healer standing beside her, the one with blue skin, stepped closer. She was the most experienced of the Zarnesian healers, but even she had never performed a procedure like this. We must be careful, she said, her voice soft but filled with concern. "The queen's body is already weak. Any mistake could worsen her condition." Lena nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The queen's body had been weakened by the implant, and now, removing it was a delicate process. Were too rough, the queen might not survive. But Alina knew that this was the only way to give her a fighting chance. With a steady hand, Lena delicately detached the implant from its position inside the queen's chest. As she did, she felt a wave of relief. The device had been draining the queen's strength, but now that it was removed, the queen's body would begin to heal. Slowly but surely, Alina believed it could happen. Once the implant was free, Lena carefully placed it on the sterile tray beside the queen's bed. The queen's chest rose and fell more evenly now, her breathing less strained. As Lena could see the faintest hint of color returning to her skin. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "I've removed it," Alina said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "Now we wait." The royal healers gathered around, watching as Alina stepped back from the queen's bedside. Garo took a deep breath and sighed with relief. The tension in the room seemed to ease, but it was still too soon to know if the procedure would be successful. The queen had been through so much, and it would take time for her body to recover. Fully, Alina turned to the royal healers. "I've done what I can. Now we need to monitor her and make sure she heals properly. Her heart will need time to recover, but without that implant, her body will start to regain its strength." Healers nodded, their expressions serious. They had seen the queen's condition deteriorate over the past few hours, and they knew this was their last chance. If this didn't work, they might lose her forever. "We will keep a close eye on her," the silver-skinned healer said. "We are grateful. You've done something we never could have." Alina gave a small nod, her mind still focused on the queen's recovery. "I'm not done yet," she said softly. "This is just the beginning." She stood up from the queen's bedside, her body aching with the strain of the procedure. The room had grown quiet once again, and Alina could feel the weight of the silence. The healers had stepped back, allowing the queen's body to rest. As Alina looked at the queen's peaceful face, she couldn't help but wonder who had placed the implant inside her body and why. What kind of enemy had the power to infiltrate the Zarnesian Empire in such a subtle, deadly way? Alina couldn't answer that yet. She knew one thing for sure. She had saved the queen for now. The next steps would be critical. The queen needed rest, but they also needed answers. Lena's work wasn't over. As she left the medical suite, she felt the weight of the task ahead of her. This was only the beginning. The Zarnesian Empire had been attacked, and Alina had been the one to stop it for now. But there was still much more to uncover, and she was determined to find out who had targeted the queen and why. The queen's life had been saved. But Alina knew this was just the beginning of a much larger story. Alina stepped away from the queen's bedside, her eyes still fixed on the pale, fragile figure in front of her. The monitors now showed a steady heartbeat, and the faint but steady rise and fall of the queen's chest was a sign that her body was beginning to heal. It was a relief, but Alina knew that the battle wasn't over. The queen had been saved from the immediate danger, but her body was still weak, and the road to full recovery would take time. The room was quieter now. The alien healers, who had once watched Alina with skepticism, now stood in a circle around the queen's bed, watching for any changes. They no longer doubted her methods. They had seen the results for themselves. Elena's human healing techniques had worked when their advanced medical technology had failed. Garo, the queen's advisor, stood at the foot of the bed, his expression one of quiet gratitude. "You've done what we thought was impossible," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "You've saved our queen." Alina turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "I've only done part of it. The queen needs time to heal. She needs rest, and she needs to regain her strength. But the most important thing is that she's alive." Garo nodded, his face tense with concern. "And what about the implant? What caused it to be placed in her body?" Lena paused, her gaze returning to the small metallic device that lay on a tray beside the queen's bed. The implant was a puzzle. The alien healers had been unable to recognize it, and Alina had never seen anything like it in her own studies. It was advanced and clearly designed to be hidden. slowly draining the queen's energy without detection. Whoever had placed it there had planned the attack carefully, making sure it would be nearly impossible to detect until it was too late. I don't know yet, Alina admitted, but I will find out. Whoever did this is still out there, and they're a danger to the queen and to everyone here. The royal healers nodded in agreement, their faces grim. They understood the gravity of the situation. An enemy who could infiltrate the queen's body so easily was a threat to the entire Zarnesian Empire. Alina, you've already done so much for us, Garrow said, his voice quiet but sincere. Is there anything we can do to help you in your investigation? Alina turned to him, her eyes narrowing in thought. She had only just begun to piece together the mystery behind the implant. But the fact that someone had gotten so close to the Queen and had so much access to the highest levels of the Zarnesian Empire was troubling. Whoever had orchestrated, this was a powerful figure, someone who had resources and influence. And Alina was determined to find out who. I'll need access to all records of the Queen's recent interactions, Alina said firmly. Anything that might show who had contact with her, who might have been close enough to place the implant. Garrow hesitated but then nodded. I'll make sure you have what you need, but be careful. There are many political tensions in the Empire right now. The Queen's recovery will be a symbol of hope to some, but it could also be seen as a threat by others. Lena understood the warning. The Zarnesian Empire was vast and filled with political intrigue. If someone was plotting against the Queen, it could be anyone, from a rival faction to an enemy within her own court. She would have to tread carefully, gathering information without drawing too much attention to herself. I will be careful, Alina replied, but I'll get to the bottom of this. The Queen deserves to know who betrayed her. As Alina spoke, she felt a small shift in the Queen's condition. The slight rise and fall of the Queen's chest was now more even, the color slowly returning. To her skin, Alina could see that the Queen was starting to stir, her eyes fluttering open. Garrow stepped forward, and the healers leaned in as well, their attention entirely on the Queen. The Queen's eyes slowly focused, and her gaze landed on Alina. For a moment, there was only silence in the room as the Queen took in her surroundings. Then, her voice, weak but steady, broke the stillness. Where am I? Queen Zarnes whispered, her eyes scanning the faces of the healers, and then landing on Alina. What happened? You've been very ill, Your Majesty, Alina said gently. But you're going to be fine now. You had an implant inside you that was making your heart fail. I removed it, and your body is starting to heal. The Queen's eyes widened slightly, as if the words had not fully registered. An implant? She repeated, her voice hoarse. Alina nodded. Yes, it was placed inside your body by someone. We don't know who yet, but we're going to find out. The Queen's expression darkened as she processed Alina's words. A betrayal, she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Who would dare to do such a thing? Alina didn't have an answer for her, but she knew they would find. The Zarnesian Empire was vast, with many factions vying for power. And it was clear that someone had used the Queen's vulnerability to their advantage. But whoever was behind this wouldn't get away with it. Alina was determined to see justice done. The Queen slowly lifted her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered to Alina. You saved me. Alina bowed her head slightly. It was an honor to help, Your Majesty. But there's still much to be done. We need to find out who did this, and why. The Queen's eyes flashed with determination. I will not rest until I know who tried to kill me. The Empire must know the truth. Alina nodded. I'll help. You, Your Majesty. Together, we'll uncover the truth. As the healers worked to stabilize the Queen further, Alina stepped back, her mind already racing with the next steps in the investigation. The Queen was recovering, but the real work was just beginning. Whoever had orchestrated this attack was still out there, and they were a threat to more than just the Queen. Alina would have to navigate the political complexities of the Empire, work with those she could trust, and uncover the secrets that had nearly cost the Queen her life. The Queen's survival marked the beginning of a new chapter for both her and the Empire. Alina had earned her place in the heart of the Zarnesian court, and she would use that trust to uncover the enemy hiding in the shadows as she left the medical suite. Lena felt the weight of her mission ahead. But for the first time since her arrival, she felt confident. She was not alone in this fight. The Queen had survived, and together they would uncover the truth.